April 5th, 1999, Saturday, 1 a.m. The night was wrong. It was not just the silence, it was the feeling that the world itself was holding its breath. The air was thick, unmoving, pressing down on my skin like invisible hands. The moon was barely visible, swallowed by heavy clouds that refused to shift. And I was standing at the rusted, half-broken gates of Black Hollow Cemetery, a place no one in town spoke about after dark. But I was not just standing there. I was being watched. The sensation had been crawling over me since the moment I stepped out of my car. The hairs on my arms stood up. My breath came slower, heavier. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The way the human brain finds faces in shadows, figures in trees. But then something moved, a flicker in my peripheral vision, a shape just beyond the fence. I turned my head sharply. Nothing, just rows of ancient crumbling tombstones, barely visible through the thickening fog. Just the whispers of the wind weaving through the dead branches of forgotten trees. Then why did I feel like I was not alone? I took a deep breath, gripping my flashlight like it was a weapon, and stepped inside. The graveyard that should not exist. The second my foot touched the ground inside the cemetery, a sound rippled through the night, like a distant hollow breath. I froze. The graveyard did not look real. The headstones were too old, too worn, their names erased by time. Some leaned at unnatural angles. Others were split in half, as if something had clawed its way out. The fog coiled around them like living shadows, curling and uncurling as if it was breathing. I should not have come here, but it was already too late. Somewhere deep within the cemetery, a sound echoed, a sharp, rhythmic knocking, like a fist against wood. Knock, knock, knock. It came from beneath the ground. My breath caught in my throat. My skin turned ice cold. It was coming from a coffin. Someone was knocking from inside a grave. My hands trembled as I lifted the flashlight, sweeping it over the tombstones, trying to locate the sound. Then, movement. Not in front of me, behind me. I turned too fast, the flashlight slipping in my grip, the beam shaking as I pointed it toward the tall, dead trees near the cemetery's edge. A figure stood there, still, motionless, watching. It was too tall. Its limbs were too long. Its head was tilted slightly, as if it were studying me with an unnatural curiosity. I could not see its face. The darkness wrapped around it, swallowing its features. But I knew it was smiling. The moment I blinked, it was gone. My chest tightened. My pulse thundered against my ribs. I should have turned back. I should have run. But something deep inside me, something beyond fear, pushed me forward. The mausoleum that breathed. I did not realize I was heading toward the mausoleum until I was standing right in front of it. It was massive, ancient stone, cracked and covered in vines, its entrance slightly open. A shadowed gap, as if it had been waiting for someone to enter. For me to enter. I should have turned around. But then I heard it. A whisper so close to my ear it felt like cold breath against my skin. "You are not supposed to be here." I spun around. Nothing. The wind had stopped. The world had stopped. The only sound was the distant rhythmic knocking from beneath the earth. Then, as if answering it, the door of the mausoleum swung open wider, inviting me in. I took a step forward, swallowing the scream rising in my throat. My flashlight's beam trembled against the stone walls as I stepped inside. The second I did, the door slammed shut behind me. Darkness swallowed me whole. Something was down here with me. At first, there was nothing, just my ragged breathing, just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from deeper within the mausoleum. I was not alone. My flashlight flickered violently, barely cutting through the suffocating darkness. The air smelled wrong, like damp stone, rot, and something older than death itself. The footsteps grew louder. I lifted the flashlight with trembling hands, forcing myself to move forward. The passage was tight, lined with crypts and broken urns, the air pressing in around me. Then I saw it, a set of stairs leading down. A part of me screamed to turn back, to run. But something stronger, something beyond reason, pushed me forward. I stepped down. The moment I did, a voice whispered my name. I turned, but I was alone. Or so I thought. The walls around me were moving. At first, I thought it was a trick of the flickering light. But then I saw the truth. Hands. Pale, skeletal hands were pushing out of the walls, their fingers twisting and reaching as if trying to grab me. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat, and my foot hit something soft. I looked down. A coffin. Its lid was half open. My hands shook as I raised the flashlight. Inside, there was no body, only deep, frantic scratches on the wood. Claw marks as if someone had tried to escape from the inside. Then, the coffin lid moved. I did not scream. I did not breathe, because something else did. A long, slow, rasping breath, not from the coffin, from right behind me. I turned. There was a mirror at the end of the corridor. In its reflection, I saw myself, but I was not alone. Behind me stood a figure, tall, hollow-eyed, grinning. Then it reached for me, and the lights went out. The whisper still lingered in my ears, an icy breath against my skin, though there was no one around. My flashlight trembled slightly in my grip, the weak beam barely piercing through the heavy darkness. Every instinct told me to leave, to turn back the way I came. But something about the way the night pressed in around me, the way the air itself felt alive, made it impossible to move. I swallowed hard and forced myself to take another step forward. The moment my foot touched the damp ground, the wind picked up, a slow, creeping gust that carried the scent of damp earth and something else, something rotten. I froze. A figure stood at the edge of the graveyard. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The shape was barely visible, its form blending into the dark silhouettes of the tombstones. I narrowed my eyes, heart hammering against my ribs. Was it a person, a statue, a trick of the light? Then it moved. Not the way a person moves. It did not walk. It glided. A slow, unnatural drift, like something being pulled by an invisible string. The air around me felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on my chest. My mouth had gone dry. I wanted to call out, to demand who, what it was, but my throat locked up. The figure stopped, stood motionless, watching. Then, just as silently, it turned and disappeared behind a large mausoleum. I should have left. Every single nerve in my body told me to run. But something about the way it moved, the way it simply faded into the shadows, drew me forward instead. I took a slow step, then another, my breathing shallow. As I neared the mausoleum, I felt it again, that unnatural cold, seeping into my skin like ice water. The structure loomed over me, the name above its iron door worn away by time. I hesitated. The wind had stopped. The trees had gone silent. Even the distant hum of the highway, which I had heard faintly when I first arrived, was completely gone. It was as if the world outside the graveyard had ceased to exist. And then I heard it, a sound from inside the mausoleum, fingernails, scraping against stone. I sucked in a sharp breath. My flashlight flickered. It came again, slow, deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I backed away, pulse hammering against my skull. That was it. I was leaving. But before I could turn, the iron door creaked open. On its own. I stared, frozen, as the darkness inside seemed to swell, stretching outward as if it were alive. A low, hollow voice whispered from within. "Why did you come?" The words were barely audible, but they did not come from a human throat. There was something wrong with them, something stretched and distorted, like an old recording playing just a little too slow. I could not breathe. Something shifted inside. A shadow moved. Then, silence. The kind of silence that is not empty, but filled with something unseen. Watching, waiting. My flashlight flickered again, and in that split second of darkness, something stepped forward. I did not wait to see what it was. I ran. I stumbled over the uneven ground, nearly tripping as I sprinted past rows of tombstones. The graveyard seemed different, warped. The paths were no longer where they had been before. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches reaching like skeletal hands. Then up ahead, I saw it. The gates. Salvation. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. The gates were chained shut. Thick rusted links wrapped around the iron bars, holding them tight. My hands shook as I grabbed at them, yanking with all my strength. They would not budge. Behind me, the whisper returned. Closer. You do not belong here. A cold breath brushed against my ear. My heart nearly stopped. I spun around. They were there. Figures, rising from the graves. Some still half buried, clawing their way up from the dirt. Their faces, if you could call them that, were sunken, hollow, twisted in expressions of endless suffering. And they were coming for me. I gritted my teeth and pulled harder at the chains. Come on, damn it! The metal groaned, but it would not give. A soft rustling sound like dry leaves being crumpled came from right behind me. I turned my head. A figure loomed over me, inches away. But it was not one of the corpses. It was the thing from before, the one I had seen at the edge of the cemetery, and now I could see its face, or rather, the absence of one. There was nothing, just a void where eyes, a mouth, a soul should have been. My body locked up. The thing raised its hand, long skeletal fingers stretching toward my face. A single thought screamed in my mind, do not let it touch you. I threw myself sideways, crashing to the ground. My flashlight skidded across the dirt, its beams swinging wildly. In that brief flash of light, I saw the graveyard as it truly was. The tombstones were shifting, rearranging themselves. The trees were taller, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes. The ground itself was moving, breathing. I scrambled to my feet, gasping. The figures were getting closer. The thing with no face was still there, its head tilting unnaturally as if studying me. And then it smiled. A smile that should not have been possible. A smile that stretched too wide, too unnatural, splitting its entire face open like a crack in reality. I nearly choked on my own breath. My legs refused to move. The wind picked up again, this time carrying whispers, not on, but many. A chorus of voices murmuring in a language I did not understand. The chains on the gate rattled. I turned sharply. The lock, it was gone. The gate was open. I did not question it. I ran. I burst through the gate, sprinting onto the empty road beyond. The moment my feet left the graveyard, the air changed. The sounds of the night returned. The wind, the distant hum of the highway, the chirping of crickets. I turned back. The cemetery was normal. The tombstones were still. The trees were just trees. The gates were slightly ajar, swaying gently in the wind. No figures, no shifting shadows, nothing. But I knew better. I knew I had not imagined it, and as I stood there, catching my breath, I saw one final thing, my flashlight, still lying inside the graveyard, its beam flickering weakly, and next to it, a handprint, pressed deep into the dirt. Not mine. A deep, guttural whisper slithered through the trees behind me.
My breath caught in my throat as I turned, my flashlight flickering violently. The graveyard was no longer just a resting place for the dead, it was alive with something unseen, something ancient. The air grew thick, heavy, as if unseen eyes were pressing in from every direction. My legs trembled, my instincts screaming at me to run, but a force, something unnatural, kept me rooted to the ground. And then, I saw it, a movement among the gravestones, not just a shadow, but something shifting, crawling, its form impossible to comprehend. The whispering grew louder, no longer distant, but right at my ear. I wanted to scream, but before I could, the world around me twisted. The graves seemed to stretch endlessly, the tombstones bending, warping. The ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid. My vision blurred, my mind unable to process the horror before me. And then, everything went dark. Darkness swallowed me whole. My breath hitched in my throat as an unbearable silence wrapped around me, suffocating and absolute. I was no longer standing in the graveyard, or at least, not in the same graveyard. The air was thick with decay, and the scent of damp earth filled my lungs. My flashlight had gone out completely, leaving me in total blackness. I reached for my phone, fumbling to turn on the screen, but the second I pressed the button, a cold, skeletal hand clamped over mine. My entire body seized with terror. It was not just cold, it was dead. The flesh felt leathery, brittle, as if it had been rotting for centuries. I could not breathe. I could not move. Then, a voice. It did not speak in words, but in a sound that scraped against my bones, filling my head with a sickening dread. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the whispering hisses and distorted murmurs. And then, all at once, I was yanked backward. I landed hard on damp soil, gasping as my flashlight flickered back on. The graveyard looked different now, distorted, elongated. The trees loomed impossibly tall, their twisted branches stretching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. The tombstones were cracked, tilted at unnatural angles, and in the distance, I saw movement. Not the rustling of wind or shifting of leaves. Something was watching me. My heart pounded as I scrambled to my feet. The air was thick with an eerie hum, like the world itself was breathing. The whispers started again, this time, closer, surrounding me. Then, I saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows, barely human in shape, their faces blurred as if reality itself refused to define them. Their movements were unnatural, disjointed, as if they were trapped between moments of existence. I turned to run, but my feet sank into the soft earth. The ground beneath me rippled like water, swallowing me inch by inch. A cold terror gripped me as I realized I was standing on a grave, and something beneath me was waking up. I struggled, clawing at the ground, but the more I fought, the deeper I sank. The figures in the darkness drew closer, their whispering voices growing louder. Then, just as my head was about to be swallowed by the earth, silence. I gasped, sitting up. The graveyard was still. The night air was heavy, but the figures were gone. The whispers had vanished. My body ached, my hands were covered in dirt, and I felt as though I had been pulled back from the edge of something unspeakable. But something had changed. The grave I had been sinking into was no longer open. The name on the tombstone had shifted, and as my flashlight beam illuminated the weathered stone, my blood turned to ice. It was my name, the date of death, tonight. A cold wind howled through the graveyard, and in its chilling gust, I heard one last whisper. You were never meant to leave. Darkness had never felt this oppressive before. It was not just the absence of light, it was something alive, something watching. The moment I crossed the cemetery gates, a thick silence fell over me. The night felt heavier, the air dense with an energy that prickled against my skin. My breathing sounded too loud, my footsteps unnaturally amplified on the dirt path. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I could not. Something had changed since that voice whispered my name in the shadows. My escape had only been an illusion. The graveyard had shifted. The path I had taken before no longer looked the same. The tombstones, cracked and covered in moss, seemed misplaced as if they had moved on their own. I glanced over my shoulder, nothing but endless darkness. The gate that I had just walked through was gone. My pulse pounded. I was trapped. Then, I heard it. A distant scraping sound, like nails dragging across stone. Slow, deliberate, coming from behind one of the larger tombstones. I forced myself to stay calm, moving forward with cautious steps. My flashlight flickered violently, struggling to stay on. The battery was full. Something else was draining it. A gust of cold wind blew through the graveyard, carrying a faint whisper. I could not make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was calling me. A chill crawled up my spine. My name. It had called my name before, but this time, it was closer. I turned the flashlight toward the rows of graves, and my heart nearly stopped. A figure stood among the tombstones. It was shrouded in shadows, its body unnaturally still. My mind screamed for me to move, to run, but my legs felt paralyzed. The figure did not breathe, did not shift. And then, in an instant, it was gone. I gasped, spinning in every direction. No sign of it, but something had changed. The air around me was colder, heavier. My flashlight dimmed even further, its beam barely cutting through the night. Then, the whisper returned, louder, more insistent. Leave, now. It was right next to me. A breath, cold, damp, brushed against my neck. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. The flashlight flickered again, and for a brief second, as the light surged, I saw them. Not one, not two, dozens. Figures standing between the graves, their hollow eyes fixed on me. Some were distorted, their limbs stretched unnaturally. Others looked almost normal, but their faces, their faces were wrong, twisted in frozen screams, their mouths stretched too wide, as if they had been calling for help for centuries. And then, they moved, not walking, not running, but shifting, blinking in and out of existence, appearing closer every time my flashlight flickered. I bolted. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as though the very earth was rejecting my presence. My footsteps echoed impossibly loud, bouncing off the tombstones and the trees that now loomed taller, their branches clawing at the sky. My breath came in ragged gasps as I darted between graves, searching desperately for a way out. The whisper followed me, too late, too late. I did not stop. I could not. But my surroundings were changing again. The graves were no longer just headstones. They were open, deep, yawning pits of darkness, as if the earth itself had been hollowed out. A realization struck me like ice water. They were waiting for me. A sickening thought crawled into my mind. I was never meant to leave. I was never supposed to escape the first time. A new sound joined the whispers. A slow, rhythmic thump. I turned the corner of a mausoleum and nearly collapsed in terror. A massive stone door stood in front of me, carved with symbols I could not understand. It pulsed as if it was breathing, but the most horrifying thing. The door was slightly open. Something was pushing from the other side. A skeletal hand, gray and rotted, with elongated fingers tipped in jagged nails, curled around the edge of the door. A second hand followed, and then, ever so slowly, it began to pull itself through. My flashlight sputtered out completely. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was a pair of empty, soulless eyes staring straight into mine. And then, everything went black. Everything was black. Not just dark, this was a void. A place where light had never existed. I could feel the cold creeping into my bones, the silence pressing against my skin like a living thing. My breath came in short, panicked gasps, but I could not hear it. I could not hear anything. And then, something shifted. A sensation, subtle at first, like a whisper of movement in the abyss. Then, the feeling of something crawling, not on my skin, but inside me, deep in my chest, writhing. I tried to move, but my body was not my own. A voice, hollow and distorted, slithered through the silence. You have seen too much. The blackness around me trembled, as if it were alive, as if it was reacting to my presence. Then, it started to pull away, unraveling like threads of shadow, revealing something beneath. The graveyard. But it was wrong. The ground was cracked and broken, pulsing like an open wound. The trees that once stood lifeless were now twisted things, their bark splitting apart like rotted flesh. The tombstones had changed, their engravings no longer names but symbols, etched deep as if something had clawed them into the stone. And the sky was no longer just dark. It was moving, writhing, watching. I stumbled back, my legs weak, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. That was when I heard it, the slow, rhythmic thump from before. I turned toward the mausoleum. The stone door that had been slightly open was now wide, gaping like a mouth. The air around it vibrated, distorting reality itself. And then, I saw it. Something was stepping through. A figure, impossibly tall, its body wrapped in layers of what looked like decayed burial cloth. But beneath the cloth, there was no flesh, no bones, just emptiness. Its head tilted unnaturally as if studying me. Then, in one fluid motion, it lunged. I did not think, I ran. The graveyard twisted around me, the tombstones shifting, the ground cracking open beneath my feet. I could hear it behind me, moving too fast, its breath like a guttural rasp against my neck. You do not belong here. The voice did not come from its mouth. It came from everywhere. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like they would collapse beneath me. Then, ahead, something new. A gate. It was not the same one I had entered through, but it was an exit. My only escape. I sprinted toward it, my heart slamming against my ribs. The air around me grew heavier, like invisible hands clawing at my limbs, trying to drag me back. The whispers swelled, a deafening chorus. Stay. I threw myself forward, diving through the gate just as an icy grip brushed against my shoulder. And then, silence. I hit the ground hard. The air was warm again. The night was normal. The graveyard. It was just a graveyard. The mausoleum door was closed, the symbols gone. The tombstones were just names again. I was out. Or so I thought. As I pulled myself up, I felt it. A weight in my pocket. My fingers trembled as I reached inside. A small, crumbling piece of burial cloth. The same kind the creature had been wrapped in. A realization crashed over me like a wave of ice. I had escaped the graveyard, but something had come with me. And then, from the darkness behind me, a whisper, so close, it brushed against my ear. "See you soon." I did not sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, staring at the crumpled piece of burial cloth on my desk. The fabric looked ancient, its edges frayed and crumbling. It should not exist. I should not have it. But there it was, a piece of something that should have never left that graveyard. And I was beginning to feel its presence. The air in my apartment was wrong, thick, heavy, like the silence before a thunderstorm, charged with something unseen. The lights flickered in short, irregular bursts. My reflection in the window seemed delayed, like it needed a second to catch up. But worst of all was the whispering. At first, I thought it was in my head, the same voice from the graveyard, a low, rasping murmur just at the edge of hearing. But when I turned off the television, when I held my breath and strained to listen, it was not in my head, it was in the apartment. I could feel it moving, in the walls, in the air. I was not alone. Then, my phone rang. The screen was black, no caller ID, no number. I hesitated, my hands trembling as I reached for it. When I answered, there was no voice, no static, just silence. "Then, you should not have left." My breath hitched. My mouth was dry, my pulse hammering against my skull. I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. Then, the call ended. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I needed to get out. I needed help. I grabbed my keys and rushed to the door, but the moment my fingers touched the handle, bang! A sudden, violent force shook the entire apartment. My walls trembled, my lights flickered, and then, my reflection in the hallway mirror moved, on its own. My breath turned shallow as I watched myself, standing motionless in the mirror. But something was wrong. My reflection was smiling. I was not. Slowly, its head tilted, as if studying me. Its eyes darkened, hollowing into two voids. My stomach twisted as I stepped back, but my reflection did not. It stayed where it was, grinning, watching. Then, it spoke. "You brought it home." I bolted. I ran out of my apartment, into the cold night air, not stopping, not looking back. My heart was racing so hard I thought I might collapse. I did not know where I was going. I just needed to be away. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no escaping it. Because I had not just brought something home. I had let it in. And now, it was never going to leave. The night was no longer just a nightmare. It had become a reality I could not escape. I sat in the dim glow of my bedroom lamp, my hands trembling as I gripped the edges of my chair. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and the sinking realization that whatever had attached itself to me was no longer content with lurking in the shadows. It wanted me. The scratches on my bedroom window had stopped. The whispers in the dark had faded. But that silence was even more terrifying. It meant something was waiting, watching, planning its next move. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror across the room, and for the first time, I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. My reflection did not blink when I did. My heart pounded as I stood up slowly, stepping toward the mirror with hesitant, shaky movements. The version of me inside the glass tilted its head ever so slightly, eyes dark and hollow. I lifted my hand, and it followed, except, for a split second, its fingers elongated unnaturally, like skeletal claws. I stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, and in that instant, I heard it, breathing, right behind me. I spun around, my body paralyzed with terror. Nothing, but the air felt heavy, dense with an unseen presence. My pulse thundered in my ears as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to turn on the flashlight. The moment the light flickered on, my bedroom door creaked open, slowly, deliberately, as if inviting me to step beyond the threshold. I was done playing its game. Summoning every ounce of courage, I ran for the front door. My fingers fumbled with the lock, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I needed to get out, to escape whatever had followed me home. But just as I yanked the door open, the hallway was wrong. It was no longer my apartment building. The walls stretched endlessly, warped and decayed like the graveyard I had been in days before. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. The dim light flickered, casting long, shifting shadows. I turned back, only to find my apartment door gone. I was trapped. A slow, deliberate tapping echoed down the endless hallway. Tap, 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 like nails on wood. I held my breath, my flashlight shaking as I pointed it toward the darkness ahead. The tapping grew louder, faster, turning into frantic scratching. Then, a voice, low, rasping, almost inhuman. "You should not have come back." My chest tightened with fear. I took a step back, but the floor beneath me groaned, the wood feeling soft, as if something was moving beneath it. My breathing grew ragged. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if they were alive. I had to move. Forcing myself forward, I ran. The hallway twisted, stretched, the walls narrowing and then expanding again in impossible ways. My flashlight flickered, the light struggling against the oppressive darkness. Then, suddenly, I was not alone. Figures loomed in the distance. Silent, motionless. Their faces were blank, empty voids where eyes and mouths should have been. But I could feel their gaze on me, burrowing deep into my soul. Then, they moved. Not walking, not running, but gliding toward me, their bodies jerking unnaturally, as if they were caught between dimensions. My legs nearly gave out, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I sprinted, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. A doorway appeared ahead, just like before. A single, flickering light hung above it, barely illuminating the rusted frame. I did not think. I lunged toward it. The moment I crossed the threshold, my vision blurred. The world twisted, and a deep, guttural scream erupted behind me. My body felt like it was being ripped apart, my very essence being pulled between realities. I could hear whispers, dozens of them, voices clawing at my mind, trying to drag me back. Then, I landed hard on the floor. My breath came in ragged gasps. I was back in my apartment. The lamp was still knocked over. The mirror stood where it had been. The door was shut. Everything was normal, except for one thing. My reflection was smiling at me. I did not move. I did not blink. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the mirror. The version of me in the reflection stood still, its head slightly tilted, its lips stretched into a slow, unnatural smile. My own face felt frozen in fear, yet the thing in the glass grinned wider, its teeth too sharp, too white. Then, it moved, without me. My heart hammered as I took a step back, but my reflection remained standing, watching, studying me. The grin widened, its eyes darkening, hollowing into pits of endless black. You should not have run. The whisper came from inside the mirror. From inside me. I lunged forward, grabbing the closest thing I could, a book from my desk, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered on impact, shards flying in all directions. For a moment, silence. Just my ragged breathing, my pounding heart. But then, a hand reached out of the broken glass. Not mine, not human. It was long, skeletal, its fingers stretching unnaturally as it gripped the frame of the mirror. Then, slowly, it crawled out. I stumbled backward, my legs barely supporting me. My stomach twisted in horror as a figure pulled itself from the mirror, its body bending and contorting like a marionette with cut strings. It had my face, my shape, but it was not me. The thing straightened, its head tilting as it examined me with a hollow gaze. Then, it took a step forward, and I ran. I bolted from the room, yanking open my apartment door. But instead of the hallway outside, I was met with darkness, a black void stretching endlessly in every direction. This could not be happening. I slammed the door shut, my chest heaving. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Behind me. I turned just in time to see the thing standing inches away, its lips still twisted into that same monstrous grin. You cannot escape yourself. Its voice was wrong, like a dozen voices speaking at once, layered, distorted. Then, it lunged. I barely dodged, slamming into my bookshelf as I scrambled away. My vision blurred, my head spinning. I needed to wake up. This had to be a nightmare. But nightmares do not bleed. I had cut my hand on the broken mirror shards. The pain was real. The blood was real. And that meant this was real. The lights flickered violently. Shadows stretched across the walls, shifting, writhing. My apartment was not my apartment anymore. I ran toward the window, desperate for an exit. But when I pulled back the curtains, my blood turned to ice. Beyond the glass was not the city. It was the graveyard. The very same one I had been trapped in that night. Rows of tombstones stretched into the distance, shrouded in thick fog. The twisted trees loomed, their branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. And in the distance, they were waiting. Figures, watching me. Their faces were blank, their bodies motionless. Then, all at once, they started walking toward me. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. My reflection, no, the thing wearing my face, stood across the room, grinning wider than ever. You never left. The words hit me like a gut punch. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. I never left the graveyard. Everything, the apartment, the city, my escape, it had all been a lie, a trick, a trap. The graveyard had never let me go. And now, it was calling me back. The figures outside were closer now. Their blank faces stared up at me through the window. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, suffocating me. The thing wearing my reflection took another step forward. Come home. My vision blurred. The room spun. The walls melted away, revealing the fog-drenched cemetery once more. I was back. And this time, there was no escape. Darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud as I stumbled through the fog-drenched graveyard. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and my legs burned with exhaustion. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something foul, like decaying flesh just beneath the surface. I did not know how long I had been running. Minutes? Hours? Time felt distorted, stretched and twisted, as if the graveyard was a living thing playing with me. The gravestones blurred past me, their inscriptions shifting and warping before my eyes. My name appeared on more than one of them. Then, I saw it. The mausoleum. It loomed ahead, its stone walls slick with moisture, its entrance a gaping maw of darkness. The whispers in the air grew louder, hissing my name, calling me forward. My body trembled, but something inside me knew. I had to go in. I stepped through the entrance, the temperature dropping instantly. The air was colder here, thick with the weight of the dead. My flashlight flickered violently before going out entirely. I was left in total darkness. Then, the door slammed shut behind me. I turned, my fingers clawing at the stone, but it was useless. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the depths of the mausoleum, a sound that did not belong to anything human. My heart pounded in my chest. A dim light flickered ahead, not from my flashlight, something else. A glow, faint and pulsing, like a dying ember. I forced myself forward, my steps hesitant, my breath held. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with each step. And then, I saw them. Figures. Pale, thin, their faces hidden beneath rotted burial shrouds. They stood in a circle, motionless, their bodies swaying slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. At their center, a pit yawned open, blacker than the darkest void. My stomach twisted. Something inside the pit was moving. One of the figures turned its head toward me, and I recognized the face beneath the shroud. It was me. My own eyes, my own expression, twisted in silent agony. The other figures slowly lifted their heads, revealing more familiar faces. All of them were me. Some looked older, some younger, but every one of them bore the same hollow expression. A cold, skeletal hand rested on my shoulder. You have always been here, a voice whispered in my ear. I wanted to scream, to run, to deny it, but the truth settled in my bones like ice. The graveyard was not a place I had stumbled into. It was where I had always been, and where I would always remain. The cold pressed against my skin like unseen hands, and I could barely feel my own breath. The cemetery had transformed into something far worse than a place of the dead. It was alive, pulsing with energy that did not belong to this world. My mind raced as I tried to process what I had just seen, the faceless entity, the robed figures, the whispers that now seemed to seep into my very bones. I wanted to run. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to flee, but something kept me rooted to the ground, something beyond fear, an unnatural force, like invisible chains wrapped around my legs. The air was thick, humming with a presence that did not want me to leave. And then, I heard it. A voice. Not a whisper this time, not the distant murmurs that had taunted me all night. This voice was close, right behind me. You should not be here. Every hair on my body stood on end. My breath hitched, my muscles stiffened, and for a single horrifying second, I felt something brush against the back of my neck. Cold, clammy, like the touch of something that had not been human for a very, very long time. I spun around, my flashlight shaking in my grip. Nothing. The shadows stretched unnaturally, warping as though they had their own consciousness. The graves around me seemed to shift, their shapes twisting, their engravings no longer readable. The moon above flickered, as if the sky itself was glitching. I took a shaky step backward, but the second my foot touched the ground, something moved in the corner of my eye. At first, it was just a shadow, shifting slightly near one of the tombstones. But then it rose, slowly, deliberately, as if it knew I was watching. A figure. Tall. Wrong. It had no eyes, no face, just a gaping void where its features should have been. Its elongated fingers twitched, reaching toward me, but it did not move. Not yet. It was waiting. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out every other sound. I did not dare blink. My mind screamed at me to move, but my body refused to obey. And then, the worst part, it smiled. Not with a mouth. It had no mouth, but I felt it smile. A silent, knowing grin stretching across that blank, faceless void. And that was when I realized, I was not alone. Slowly, almost as if the night itself was peeling away, more figures began to rise. From behind the tombstones, from the fog, from the very earth beneath my feet, dozens, no, hundreds. They stood still, watching, their bodies slightly distorted, as though reality itself was struggling to contain them. Some had faces that flickered in and out of existence. Others had no faces at all. Some crawled, their limbs bending at angles that should have been impossible. The whispering returned, now overlapping, now growing louder. I could not understand the words, but I could feel them. They were inside my head, twisting my thoughts, filling my mind with memories that were not my own. And then, they moved. Not fast, not yet, but they shifted closer, like a flickering film, disappearing and reappearing inches nearer than before. My breath caught in my throat. I had to run, but where? I turned, scanning the graveyard, my vision swimming with the impossible. The entrance was gone, the pathway I had taken, gone. The only thing in front of me now was a single, open grave. Deep, dark, beckoning. A gust of wind hit me, carrying with it the scent of rotting earth. The figures did not stop. They were coming. I had a choice. Run blindly into the darkness, hoping to find an escape. Or descend into the grave, into whatever waited below. I had seconds to decide. And then, the first hand reached for me. The hand clamped around my ankle, its grip ice cold and inhuman. I barely had time to react before another hand emerged from the fog, grasping at my wrist. They were pulling me in. The whispering turned into laughter, distorted and unnatural, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. Panic overtook every rational thought. I kicked, thrashed, screamed, but the grip of the faceless figures was unshakable. More of them emerged, shifting closer in their unnatural way, blinking in and out of existence. My flashlight flickered violently, and in that strobing light, I saw them for what they truly were. Not ghosts, not spirits, something worse. Their bodies were warped, stretched, as though they had been trapped between dimensions, stuck in a reality they did not belong to. Some had empty sockets where eyes should have been, others had grinning, jagged mouths that stretched too wide, and a few seemed to be half-formed, as if they were unfinished creations of something sinister. I did not have time to understand. I had to escape. My eyes darted to the open grave. It was my only chance. Without thinking, I lunged forward, breaking free from the hands that clawed at me. I dove into the pit, expecting to land in cold dirt. But I did not fall. Instead, I kept falling. The ground beneath me disappeared, and suddenly, I was plummeting through darkness. The wind roared in my ears, and my screams were swallowed by the void. The further I fell, the colder it became. My body felt weightless, and I realized with growing horror that there was no bottom. Then, a light. Not a warm, welcoming light. A doorway, suspended in the abyss. I had no choice. I reached for it, stretching my arms, straining against the crushing emptiness around me. Just as my fingers brushed the edge, I was yanked through. I landed hard on solid ground. Grass. The scent of earth filled my lungs. My heart pounded as I gasped for breath, my hands trembling. Slowly, I looked up. I was back. The graveyard was silent. The tombstones were still. The fog had vanished. The sky above was normal, the moon full and bright. Had I imagined it? Had I lost my mind? I stood up on shaking legs, turning toward the grave I had jumped into. It was gone. No open pit. No sign that anything had ever been disturbed. Just an old, weathered tombstone. My breath caught in my throat as I read the inscription. Rest in peace, my name. Born, my birth year. Died, tonight's date. My blood ran cold. I stumbled backward, my head spinning. How? Was I? No, I was alive. I was here. I had escaped. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A figure, standing at the edge of the graveyard, watching me. It had my face. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had not escaped. I had taken someone else's place. A whisper, carried by the wind, reached my ears. You should not be here. And then, the lights went out. The end. If this story sent chills down your spine, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. What would you do if you found your own name on a tombstone? Would you run? Or would you accept your fate? Let me know in the comments, if you are still here. And remember, sometimes, the dead do not stay buried. See you in the next story, if you make it that far.